Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This episode is going to be quite a dive into what some may consider supernatural. And the topic tonight is all about electrogravitics, or more colloquially known as anti-gravity.
Yeah, very exciting. Alien technology, pretty much.
Alien technology, and as we'll see, also very human technology.
I wanted to say that our last episode on YouTube did really well, so that was really exciting.
Yeah.
To see new people tuning in to the podcast.
Yeah, that was really, really cool and really, encouraging for us. And it's good to see whenever people comment, we love it. And if you guys are watching and tuning in, if this is being suggested, then feel free to subscribe. And we have a whole cache of other episodes that aren't quite available on YouTube, but you can find through the link in the description to our audio source, because that's where we started.
Yeah.
Exciting. So, basically, this whole theory starts kind of twisting what we know about physics and gravity on its head. And the first thing that we're going to dive into around anti-gravitics, and this is a term that's been coined over the last 100 or so years, and it talks about a form of electromagnetic propulsion that can levitate, move, and transport vehicles using the principle of anti-gravity. And we kind of first get a look into this through the legend himself, the one and only Nikola Tesla.
Oh, yeah.
And there's many reports about what Nikola Tesla was doing, and a lot, as many of you know who know Nikola Tesla's history, he was an inventor who lived between 1856 to 1943. He is pretty much known as the inventor of our modern world. He created almost everything we know: electrical grids, TV, television, radio, all this stuff can be attributed to him. And it is through him that he challenges even Einstein's theory of relativity and proposes a different theory to gravity, and even tests these theories and proves through his experiments that gravity can be controlled using forms of electromagnetic propulsion. And we will be getting into that, as well as some other experiments into anti-gravity, and be ending on one of the most famous stories in ufology by Bob Lazar and what he experienced with anti-gravity as well.
Yeah, that's what I have most understanding of, is Bob Lazar's experience, and that's what makes me connect it to alien technology, because obviously it was discovered on these alien crafts. So I'm excited to get into that, but also to learn more about other people's experience with anti-gravity.
And this is very cool because it kind of paints a different picture of the universe as we know it. A lot of what we think about the universe in terms of gravity is that typical almost diagram or representation where you have maybe a heavy bowling ball on the fabric on some large sheet or fabric, and it's creating this bend in the fabric. And this is kind of Einstein's theory of relativity, that the gravity bends space-time due to its mass, and the mass of an object is what creates gravity.
Mm-hmm.
But Nikola Tesla had a very different idea, and we'll start by kind of going over his views on the universe. So Nikola Tesla saw the universe as filled with an invisible matter, which he called the ether. And It was long ago that he recognized that all perceptible matter comes from a primary substance of a tenuity beyond conception and filling all space. The akasha, or luminiferous ether, which is acted upon by the life-giving prana, or creative force, calling into existence in never-ending cycles all things and phenomena. And this is his words, written in an article when he was still alive. He goes on to say, the primary substance, thrown into infinitesimal whirls of prodigious velocity, becomes gross matter. The force subsiding, the motion ceases, and matter disappears, reverting to the primary substance. Can man control this grandest, most awe-inspiring of all processes in nature? Can he harness her inexhaustible energies to perform all their functions at his bidding? More still, can he so refine his means of control as to put them in operation simply by the force of his will? If he could do this, he would have powers almost unlimited and supernatural at his command. But with a slight effort on his part, old worlds would disappear and new ones of his planning would spring into being. He could fix, solidify, and preserve the ethereal shapes of his imagining, the fleeting visions of his dreams. He could express all the creations of his mind on any scale in forms concrete and imperishable. He could alter the size of the planet, control its seasons, guide it along any path he might choose through the depths of the universe. He could make planets collide and produce his suns and stars, his heat and light. So that was just a very poetic Nikola Tesla, which is one of the things I like about him, is that he's very poetic in his writing. Even in his own autobiography and scientific writings, he tries to express like this poetic way of speaking, which is very contrast to some of the other scientists who have a very, scholarly, logistical, factual approach to things.
Well, it goes along with his ideas and concepts to be like that, because they are pretty out there. They're, very different to the status quo when it comes to science.
Yeah.
And yeah, like even listening to that, it's just like, who wouldn't wish that to be true, to have almost like Harry Potter level magical powers.
Yeah.
The way he is like sort of describing.
Yeah. So he's kind of describing this prima materia, this etheric substance that is invisible, that makes up all things. It is the charge that causes electrons and protons to come together. It is the charge that gives life to living things, and it returns once things die. So in the entropy of decay, this primal energy returns into the invisible fabric of the universe. And this is what he was trying to harness. And we know through some of his patents and some of his inventions that he was describing like free energy devices. And we go into this in a lot of detail in our free energy episode.
Yeah.
But he was actually harnessing this energy to create electricity and power. And he said that just a small 1 square meter could power the entire United States for a day of this energy. And it was these concepts that led him to his play, his scientific delving into of gravity and electrogravitics. So Nikola Tesla proposed the dynamic theory of gravity, and he explains how the gravity is related to the electromagnetic force. This is a model that deals with matter, ether, and energy, and how these three things relate to one another. It is a unified field theory that unites all the existing fundamental forces and the responses of the particles themselves in a theoretical framework. And when Tesla was 82, instead of speaking at a dinner party, he issued a written statement. And this is the statement: I have worked out a dynamic theory of gravity in all details and hope to give this to the world very soon. It explains the causes of this force and the motions of heavenly bodies under its influence so satisfactorily that it will put an end to idle speculation and false conceptions as that of curved space. Boom. He just dug at Einstein right there. So Einstein's theory of curved space and relativity, according to the relativists, space has a tendency to curvature owing to an inherent property of presence of celestial bodies. Quote, granting a semblance of reality to this fantastic idea, it is still very self-contradictory. So he's going against Einstein's propositions and his theories of relativity. He goes on to say, every action is accompanied by an equivalent reaction, and the effects of the latter are directly opposite to those of the former. So if you think of a magnet, there's a negative field and a positive field. They're inverse to one another. All actions have an equivalent reaction. Supposing that the bodies act upon the surrounding space, causing curvature of the same, it appears to my simple mind that the curved spaces must react on the bodies and producing the opposite effect, straighten out the curves. Since action and reaction are coexistent, it follows that the supposed curvature of space is entirely impossible. He's saying that if the planets were acting on the curvature of space, the curvature of space should be having a reaction back. However, even if it existed, it would not explain the motions of the bodies as observed. Only the existence of a field force can account for them, and its assumption dispenses with space curvature. All literature on this subject is futile and destined to oblivion. So he's trying to crush this theory. And this theory has ultimately been suppressed because, as you see, he was wanting to release it. He had a lot of papers and stuff. He's saying, I'm about to release this to you. He died soon after, and all his papers were seized by the government and put into like a warehouse and held, hidden. So and this is not the first time it's happened with Tesla. Tesla also believed in clean and free energy. And in his middle age, he had invented a car with an antenna and an electric battery that could drive itself and continuously charged itself. It did not need fuel. It did not need gas. It just needed this. It had this antenna that was tapping into this ether energy, which he calls it, and charging the battery constantly. So, it doesn't need a soothsayer to realize how the oil and natural gas companies would obviously stand against such development, and how other, government agencies might want to hide this revelation. And we go into that a lot in free energy.
Yeah, because I guess you have the Tesla cars, by Elon Musk, and they are battery powered and seen as better for the planet, but obviously they don't self-charge. So the reason that technology has been allowed to come out is because they can make money off of it, have it by selling electricity at charging points or even through your home. Yeah. And if you look at a lot of the free energy technology that is available to us, it has some kind of tie where companies or the government are making money off of it. With solar panels, a lot of the time they've been put up so that they're feeding into the grid of a company, and you're losing money there. So anything like what Tesla has proposed in the past is of course going to be completely squashed and hidden from us because they can't make money off of that. And the big giants, they want to be making a lot of money.
Yeah. So the philosophy of our industrial age is if it doesn't have a meter on it, then they don't want it. And that
it
quote
hasn't changed.
was by John D. Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Back when Tesla was proposing all these ideas. And it hasn't changed, This is...
And even with like the first statement that you read of his, where it's sort of saying how much power like we can have and with our own creative minds and what we can tap into, and what information is available to us through the ether, all that stuff. It's not surprising it's to be suppressed because they want us to like believe the narrative that they've written for us, which is limiting, and we feel powerless. Basically, the more powerless we feel, the more powerful they are.
Yeah, definitely. So in 1897, when Tesla presented his theory of the dynamics of gravity, he said that all bodies emit microwaves whose voltage and frequency are determined by their electrical content and relative motion. More than 100 years ago, Nikola Tesla managed to measure the microwave radiation of our planet and concluded that it is only a couple of centimeters of wavelength. Tesla went on to say that the frequency and voltage of the microwave radiation on Earth were greatly influenced by the speed and mass of our planet. The gravitational interaction with other celestial bodies such as the Sun was determined by the interaction of the microwaves between the celestial bodies. So we're beginning to imagine all these electrical fields, electromagnetic fields between the celestial bodies, and that our interaction, our gravitational interaction, is based on these electromagnetic fields and the celestial bodies interacting. Just how similarly, if there's some sort of attraction to a person, even a person is emitting a certain electromagnetic field, they're releasing certain electrical biochemicals, and our field might be attracted to that field, and that is a form of electromagnetic attraction just through our bodies as humans ourselves. And Tesla went on to say that the frequency and voltage of the microwave the voltage and microwave radiation on Earth were greatly influenced by the speed and mass of the planet. Okay, so we went over that. So Tesla confirmed this by placing two metal plates at a distance and electrifying them with high voltage, high frequency currents. With sufficient high voltage and frequency, the space between them became a solid state. So what he was doing was electrifying the currents in the air, condensing the ether into a dense matter that made it so that the air became a solid state. He also worked with a single plate of zinc weighing approximately 2 pounds, and it became suspended in the air between these two electrical charges. So he had these great electrical charges, and in the air, suspended there by these electromagnetic forces, was a zinc plate. And that was one of his first experiments and demonstrations of this electrogravitic technology. He was able to suspend something in the air using purely electromagnetic forces. Although these principles guided his research and his experiments of the future, Tesla did not announce his theory until near the end of his life, after being disappointed by the war. The dynamic theory of gravity is not mentioned as it should, and this is because the government of the United States classified the file. So they took it and hid it. Unfortunately, a few details were publicly stated by Tesla about his theory, the issue of how space is curved by gravitational effect, leading some to believe that Tesla did not understand Einstein's theory, which was not about curving of space at all, but about a curved space-time. And there is some disagreement about Tesla's exact understanding of Einstein's theory. The truth is, though, that there was a difference between Tesla and Einstein. While the former wanted the best for humanity, the second defended and often worked with the big powers, including developing weapons in the war. Einstein. So, according to his theory, the concept of ether is similar to what dark matter would be. And that's what scientists are talking about now, that space cannot just be empty. There is this network, this web, this web of frequency of dark matter that they call it dark matter because we can't see it. That's running throughout everything. And it's not just in space, it's running through everything.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's kind of like if you think of like a digital image, like a video game or a website page, or like everything is even what seems like the blank part or the background part is still like got code running through it,
exactly.
Right? That's how I can kind of see it.
Totally. It's like
this space here, it still needs code to exist.
Yeah.
To make things 3D.
It's kind of like the Matrix, except it's not done in numbers. It's done in what he's saying is ether.
Yeah, unless we are in a simulation. And it is done in numbers.
Yeah. So Tesla said that space was not curved and that all forces were related to each other, both the speed of sound and the speed of light and X-rays. So everything is related to one another. And there's some theories out there that are like saying that every particle is part of one 8-dimensional shape, that that we think everything's separate, but it's only because we can only perceive in 3 dimensions that we don't see the larger picture. Mm-hmm. And so something similar here, not quite this 8th-dimensional shape theory, but he's saying that every force is related to each other in some way. And he solved it using deep knowledge of mathematics. And many people even believe that he was Venusian, that he had come from the sphere of Venus, that he was almost, not quite from this earth.
He could have possibly been channeling the Venusian being.
Yeah. Yeah, so this goes on to continue to diss Einstein's theory of relativity.
And I don't think that probably helped him at the time,
No, he was a revolutionary, and revolutionaries are never, when you think of the person who invented the telescope, and then they said that the planets were curved, and he got, strung up and killed.
Oh, right. Gosh.
Yeah.
But, it is gonna hold him back, especially if you're coming out guns blazing at the Einstein and stuff.
Yeah.
Even though I think it's important that this stuff came out, it's amazing that we're even able to get as much information as we have on a lot of Tesla's stuff, right? Because this stuff is really held back and suppressed.
Yeah. So according to portions of his theory, mechanical motions are universally a result of electromagnetic forces acting upon and through media being space. Unfortunately, his mathematical theories have never officially surfaced. They've remained classified within the U.S. government's possession. Tesla demonstrated, though, that all bodies have electrical content, and as such are all moving charges as our Earth hurls through space at incredible speed. He demonstrated through the use of his particular evacuated tubes and high-voltage coils powered by specifically designed high-frequency alternators how Earth emanates microwaves and how it behaves as a charged sphere. Based on these discoveries and their confirmations at Colorado Springs, he developed and tested his first electromagnetic machine that could fly and, quote, devoid of sustaining wings, propellers, or gas bags. So it wasn't because of the thrust of an airplane, it wasn't because of propellers, and it wasn't like a Zeppelin, with gas and bags. And here is one of his diagrams.
Oh, wow. Looks a lot like a spaceship.
Of his electromagnetic machine. It's incredibly similar to a UFO.
Yeah.
Like very, very similar. And there are a lot of different components and stuff. And we'll start to kind of get into what he was trying to achieve with this machine. And some people have also tried replicating some of his theories, though they haven't quite gotten to the level of creating something like that we know of. Mm-hmm. So Tesla's electromagnetics is composed of potentials and their corresponding motion, and this potential's motions causes the surrounding medium an equivalent and opposite effect. So basically what is happening is that it's creating this electromagnetic propulsion that is reacting with the etheric or the akashic substrate that is invisible but permeates through all things, and thus creating a field. And through fine-tuning and adjusting, he can manipulate and use the electromagnetic forces to navigate through this ocean, this substrate of ether or akasha. And here's like a lot of things that could relate to this thing, but Tesla never referred to space-time directly. So he never really had this concept. Instead, he referred to the concept of the primary substance. He also never used the relativistic twin term. He considered time as a mere man-made measure of the rate at which events occur, such as distance traveled in a certain period time for a frame of reference. So that's kind of a big sentence to unpack, but he was basically saying that time is a man-made construct, and it's all time is the perception of how far we've traveled within a certain frame of reference. So if you're thinking of like, if you're in motion through space, that is what is creating the perception of time. So our electrical motion through this, through these electromagnetic fields and waves and ether, this movement through space is what is creating our perception of time. And that's why you can have, that's why time works differently in different places, because the motion of these, if we're moving at the speed of light, time ceases. Time doesn't work in relation to the speed of light and all such that. But I am not a scientist, so I can't quite fully explain or grasp in such concrete, words what that truly means.
I do feel like time as well it sort of plays a role in like the mind control and the control of people as well, because you like hear of sort of people who are less built around the idea of time as in over the years, as in history and stuff, like tribes and places like that, where they're more sort of in the moment, living day to day. Because I can't remember exactly what tribe it was or place it was. Maybe we could find it and put it on the screen, I'm not sure, but there was like this tribe where the women were still like giving birth like into their 50s and 60s and not like really aging and having grey hair, and because there wasn't like this belief system like built in them, like, so time in a way wasn't affecting them the same way it's affecting people who sort of are really attached to the idea of time and the limitations of time and stuff.
Interesting. Time is definitely a crazy concept to think about. Tesla created these anti-gravity flying machine, and he had this theory about these electromagnetic forces, but it was suppressed, and it wasn't until kind of towards the mid-19th century that people began to start picking up his ideas again. And it was a scientist named Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell, and Heinrich Hertz, and they formulated a theory that described electromagnetic phenomena. This theory indicated that the electric and magnetic forces resulted from the effect of electric and magnetic fields existing in space between electric charges. These electric charges were produced by the ether, which was thought to be able to exert electric forces on ordinary matter. Hertz showed that moving electromagnetic fields could break away from ordinary matter and propagate through the ether as independent electromagnetic waves carrying energy. These electromagnetic waves come in both visible and invisible forms. Hertz showed that visible light is one visible form of the electromagnetic wave. Invisible electromagnetic waves including radio waves, X-rays, and microwaves. The concept of such waves moving through the ether can be likened to the waves that spread over a pond after a stone is thrown into the water. The ripples in the pond can be thought of as the equivalent of electromagnetic waves, and the still water is the equivalent of the ether. It's the untapped potential of the still waters, and harnessing that is to create the ripples in the fabric. In a pond, the force of the stone hitting the water results in the ripples. One of the things puzzling the scientists of Einstein's time was what exactly caused the formation of electromagnetic fields, whose independent movement resulted in the electromagnetic waves which they conceived of as moving through space. So they weren't sure what produced electromagnetic fields, they just knew that they were there. The ether was thought to be a backdrop at a state of absolute rest against which the movements of elements of the cosmos occurred. In his articles in 1905, Einstein did not fully reject the existence of ether. He only suggested a mathematical treatment of some relativistic problems. In 1920, after he developed the general relativity, he arrived at the conclusion that the ether should exist. This fact is of an enormous importance when citing the contributions of Albert Einstein. The Einstein statement from 1920 is missing in the Scholar Physics textbook, where only his articles from 1905 are mentioned.
Interesting.
So, as we know with Einstein, towards the end of his life, he began to become a lot more like, he began to believe in this etheric field. He began to believe, as quantum physics started to come, and he saw that quantum entanglement happen, and he saw that, he called it spooky action at a distance. And he began to say that, love is at the heart of everything.
Yeah.
He began to see that I think it was him that said, if you stare at the universe long enough, eventually the universe will stare back at you. And so this was towards the end of his life, and he was really coming into this, but those papers stopped being published and they weren't shown. So taking that all into account, let's dive into Nikola Tesla's flying saucer and his electromagnetic field lift experiments. So, from 1891 to 1893, he gave a set of lectures and demonstrations to groups of electrical engineers. As part of each show, Tesla stood in the middle of the stage, using his 6'6" height with an assistant on either side, each 7 feet away. All three men wore thick cork or rubber shoe soles to avoid being electrically grounded, and each assistant held a wire which was part of a high-voltage, low-current circuit. When Tesla raised his arm to each side, violet-colored electricity jumped harmlessly across the gaps between the men. At high voltage and frequency in this arrangement, electricity flows over a surface, even the skin, rather than into it. And this is a basic circuit which could be used by an aircraft or spacecraft. His flying saucer, the hull was made double of thin, machinable, slightly flexible ceramic. This becomes a good electrical insulator. And this is interesting because when Bob Lazar was talking about his spacecraft, he said it was a mix between a metal and a ceramic. It has no fire danger, resists any damaging effects of severe heat and cold, and has the hardness of armor, besides being easy for magnetic fields to pass through. The inner hull is covered on its outside by wedge-shaped thin metal sheets of copper or aluminum bonded to the ceramic. Each sheet is 3 to 4 feet wide at the horizontal rim of the hull and tapers to a few inches wide at the top of the hull. Each sheet is separated on either side from the next sheet by 1 or 2 inches and uncovered by the ceramic hull. So it kind of goes into the description of these, but there's some very cool things that they start to talk about. So in space, the outer hull with a slight negative charge would absorb hits from micrometeorites and cosmic rays. Any danger of this type that doesn't already have a negative electric charge would get a negative charge in hitting the outer hull and be repelled by the metallic sheets before it could hit the inner hull. So it's got some sort of electromagnetic force field. It's repelling other objects. When we talk about those UFOs, it says that, they have, when Bob Lazar goes and he talks about that machine that he was shown, when he turned it on, he tried to touch it and he couldn't. It was like it was repelled by a force of gravity. So, yeah, I just wanted to scroll through this because it gets into a lot of detail about like the exact building of it and
what happened. That's what we all want to know, right?
Yeah. So in
Did it make it fly?
So in bright sunlight, the aircraft or spacecraft may seem surrounded by hot air, a slight magnetic distortion of the light, perhaps sometimes making it not visible from certain angles. In semi-darkness and night, the metal sheets glow, even through the thin ceramic outer hull with different colors. And one of the things that's quite often reported about UFOs is these glowing colors that are flashing. Could it be the electromagnetic frequencies reacting with the metal sheets producing this glow? The visible light is a byproduct of the electricity flowing over the metal sheets according to the frequencies used. So descending, landing, or just starting to lift from the ground, the transformer primaries are near the secondary weak ends, and therefore the bottom sets of sheets glow a misty red. Red may also appear at the front of the machine when it is moving forward fast, lessening resistance up front, and orange appears for slow speed. Orange-yellow are for airplane type speeds, green and blue are for higher speeds, with a capacitor addition making it oversized for the circuit. The blue becomes bright white like a searchlight with possible risks of damaging the metal sheets involved. So when we're thinking about this, the slower it goes, it becomes red, which is very interesting because when we're talking about frequencies of light, red is the lowest frequency of light. And the higher you get up, you go to blue, purple, and then this bright white. So the faster it's going, it's producing electrical colors of blue and purple. So it's very interesting.
Also, like if you think those colors, you have like the red on the traffic lights is stop, and like the green is go, and green and blue is faster, and then also like with the chakras. You have the red, which is the root, which is the lowest, the most like matter, the most like physical, and then like the other colors are it's almost like it's lighter, right? Lighter energy, and you'd have to make the craft lighter to move faster, right? Less dense.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Yeah, because what's really happening here is that they're manipulating the electromagnetic fields to produce less weight, less mass, they're creating their own gravitational fields. When Tesla was developing arc lights to run on alternating current, there was a bothersome high-pitched whine, whistle, or buzz due to the electrodes rapidly heating and cooling. Tesla put this noise in the ultrasonic range with the special transformer already mentioned. The spacecraft gives off such noises when working at low frequencies, so it gives off this like humming, buzzing, whining sound when it's lower frequencies, so moving slower. And then when it probably gets to higher speeds, the frequencies either can't be heard or not sure why they aren't hearable. So there's a time delay in the capacitors. The capacitors recharge themselves, and half of the metal sheets are energized and the other half are recharging, alternating all around the hull of the craft. This balances the machine, giving it very good stability. This balance is less when fewer of the circuits are in use. As air molecules get into the strong magnetic fields that the machine is transmitting out, the air molecules become polarized and from lines or strings of air molecules. The normal movement of the air is stopped, so there's no more air resistance. And there is suddenly a lot more room for air molecules in this area, so more air pours in. This expansion and the lack of normal air motion makes the area intensely cold around the craft. Interesting. This is also the reason that the aircraft, a spacecraft, can fly at supersonic speeds without making sonic booms, without cracking the sound barrier. What do you think about that so far? It sounds very similar to like what we've heard about
Lazar.
UFOs and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I can't remember if he said that the ship he worked on was like silent. I'm pretty sure he said it was silent.
He said when it was starting up and landing, there was some
a noise, but the other thing that was interesting in this Tesla craft, which was similar to that, was how they said it came like unseeable and invisible in certain angles.
Yeah.
And we know that the ship that Bob Lazar worked on was like invisible from underneath, right?
Yeah.
So when you were under it, it was like it wasn't there, which is just crazy. That part really throws me off. Like,
yeah. Coming kind of to the end, there was a lot of information in that, and I was trying my best to summarize.
Yeah, you did really well.
And jump between them. But Tesla, towards the end of the life, went broke in the early 1900s. Building a combination radio and electrical power broadcasting station. The theory and experiments were correct, but the financiers didn't want this to come out. They didn't want this free energy. They didn't want this meterless technology.
Yeah, they was misled, wasn't they? They thought it was something that would benefit them, and then when they realised like, it wouldn't, then they pulled out.
Yeah. So...
we did cover that in our free energy episode if you're interested.
Yeah. And this article goes on to say that most UFOs that are reported are actually Tesla's flying saucers. So the Daily Mail reported about flying saucer projects in Nazi Germany and Hitler's plans to use these wonder weapons to attack England and USA. The article talks only about jet propulsion saucers, but the Germans were also building real anti-gravitic saucers based on inventions of Nikola Tesla. Following the wave of UFO sightings in early 1950s, Professor Giuseppe Belluzzo, a scientist, engineer, and a former Italian cabinet minister who apparently personally worked in one of these German-Italian flying saucer projects in the 1940s, was quoted in Italian and American newspapers saying, quote, "There is nothing supernatural or Martian about flying discs, but they are simply rational application of recent technique. Some great power is now launching discs to study them." And this was from a scientist engineer from the Italian cabinet minister. Nikola Tesla even said, "You should not be at all surprised if someday you see me fly from New York to Colorado Springs in a contrivance which will resemble a gas stove and weigh as much and could have necessarily enter and depart through a window." Nikola Tesla wrote to a Westinghouse electric company manager in 1912. And in some books about Tesla and his invention, the description of his box-like flying machine is told to be about his helicopter-like flyover, but actually Tesla's flying stove used an electropropulsion system, which was to be powered by external power stations in Tesla's wireless transmission of energy system, or with a power generator inside the craft. In a 1911 article from The Sun, Tesla described his flying machine. Dr. Nikola Tesla leaned back against his chair at the Waldorf last night and talked calmly of airships without planes, propellers, or any of the other gear of the now familiar aeroplanes hurtling through space at tremendous speeds, or driving more slowly, carrying great loads, and in either case, always as safely as the most prosaic of wheeled vehicles. How about aerial navigation? Dr. Tesla was asked. He considered for a moment or two and then replied with great deliberation. The application of this principle will give the world a flying machine unlike anything that has ever been suggested before. You'll have no planes, no screws, propellers, or devices of any kind hitherto used. It will be small and compact, excessively swift, and above all, perfectly safe in the greatest storm. It can be built of any size, can carry any weight that may be desired. Interesting that it's compact and small, and these UFOs that we hear are always very small, almost like they were made for children or something.
Yeah, and the no screws and stuff.
And the no screws, yeah.
Because I remember that with the Bob Lazar, it was all made of, there was no like joins in the craft.
No screws, it was seamless.
No joins, and like a really unique kind of material. Was it like that same material that like you could scrunch up and then, or is that something else?
I know it was like element 115 that he was doing. We'll get into that a bit later.
Yeah, but like, yeah, that's, how has Tesla done this? Like, like how has he built something without any screws and seams or propellers? Like I can just about like get my head around like the concept and how they've actually created this like no gravity device, but it's like, how do you actually build it like in any size without screws? Like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
He was just a genius, and who knows what.
We just want to know, like, it would be so beneficial for everybody, right?
It would. So another cool thing that relates a lot to UFO is that he tells us that his flying machine is not affected by winds or holes in the air, and that it can be held absolutely stationary in the air, even in a wind for a great length of time. So it's unaffected by the weather around it. It can go through storms, and even if there's great winds blowing against it, it can remain perfectly still.
It's amazing.
According to William Lyne, the author of the books Pentagon Aliens and Occult Ether Physics, Tesla's Hidden Space Propulsion System, and the Conspiracy to Conceal It, Werner von Braun was in Los Alamos, New Mexico around 1937, testing Tesla's saucer technology, which then developed into a wonder weapon program of Nazi Germany. After World War II, the secret Tesla saucer program traveled back to the US along with von Braun, who started also working on the US rocket and space programs. A proof of German electropropulsion flying saucer comes from FBI reports. In 1957, a Polish immigrant offered his help to the FBI to explain the car engine stalling UFO sightings of the 1950s, and shared his experience as a World War II POW working at a prison camp at Gut Altgolsen near Berlin. In the report, he tells that while going to work to a nearby area in 1944, they started to hear a high-pitched noise similar to a large electric generator, and their tractor engine stalled, which they couldn't get starting again. They didn't see any machinery nearby, but when the noise stopped, they could get their tractor starting again. A few hours later, working in the same area, he saw a vehicle slowly rising vertically from behind a tarpaulin-type wall around 50 feet high, surrounding a circular area of 100 to 150 yards in diameter. And this is the quote that he says. This vehicle, circular in shape, 75 to 100 yards in diameter and about 14 feet high, consisting of dark gray stationary top and bottom. The approximate 3-foot middle section appeared to be rapidly moving, producing a continuous blur similar to an aeroplane propeller, but extending the circumference of the vehicle. The noise emanating from the vehicle was similar to the noise previously heard. The engine of the tractor again stalled. The noise stopped, after which the engine started normally. Uninsulated metal, possibly copper cables 1 and 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter on and under the surface of the ground were observed. So he's saying that there was this like rapidly moving field around the craft that was diffusing the air, and he said it was most similar to what he imagined was like a helicopter thing, but it was happening all around the craft. And there's a photograph of this FBI report, which can be found in a book called Hitler's Flying Saucers by Henry Stevens. And the Chinese also have Tesla's anti-gravity propulsion technology, because the global war industrial complex wants Tesla's inventions to remain secret. They have produced propaganda for decades to make people believe the flying saucers are of an extraterrestrial origin, but they're not. It also seems that most of the superpowers of our planet are aware of the technology. There was an article in China Daily a while ago about the Hangzhou UFO, which made an airport closed down for a while. And the source of the matter to China Daily said that the UFO was related to the Chinese military. And this was reported also on ABC News. And one more reason for the banker industrial cabal to keep Tesla's flying machine hidden away from the public is that it apparently used over-unity technology to power itself. And that, in other words, is the free energy power system. And they would not be able to make much money this way. And Tesla talked quite often about extracting energy from the ether, dynamic light-bearing ether, but because most of Tesla's notes and papers were confiscated by U.S. authorities after his death in 1943, these over-unity generators are mostly treated as myth or as bogus science. So...
Yeah, well, the frustrating thing is, as much as... I don't agree with, holding back stuff so that we have to pay, for gas or electric and stuff, right? So we shouldn't have stuff that runs on free energy. But it's like, we know now there is ways around it. It's like when we did the medicine episode, the pharmaceutical episode. But if you think, now... they're kind of opening up the use of things like marijuana in certain countries where they know they can't make money on that, but they can't deny that it has benefits for certain people now.
Or for the economy.
Well, yeah, but it's healing people, or helping people with pain and things like that. Stuff that is outdoing other medications that they can make a lot of money on because they can patent it, but you can't patent a plant, right? But now they've made ways around that by, taxing it, and they can make money by taxing it. As much as I don't want to support that stuff, it's just okay, well, if you have one of these vehicles, then you have to pay a certain tax for airspace, or they could make something
but
up.
How much
right?
tax would you have to do to make up for everything? All gas,
you're paying for the
electricity.
They already have a monopoly
oil.
on who's making these things, right? And so you have to buy the product, which would be really expensive in the first place. And then on top of it, even to be able to fly a plane, right, you have to have some kind of license. So what they're like they can get control over everything that they want, So I just feel like there is a way that we could have these out, even under their brutal suppressive control. We're seeing with things, as example marijuana, that we can push for this stuff, to fit into the system as much as they don't want it to.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying. Yeah, it's going to bring down companies like gas. But those companies, like, if you really...
They rule the world.
Yeah, but if you think of it in a big scale, the amount of people that know that stuff is not good for the planet now, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
You know, it's not good for our future, especially for, like, the children of the future, you know. We know that. So that's why companies like Tesla, cars, you know, are coming in.
But he's not doing it for the good of the planet.
No, he's not. But I mean, he is selling it with that philosophy, with that idea, right? People are buying into it because they're like, oh, like, this is way better. Like, look, you know,
But
I'm doing better than...
what produces electricity that he's charging his vehicle?
Yeah, and also those batteries are created with a very rare mineral or something, or
lithium.
Yeah,
which
right?
is really harmful.
Yeah, really bad. Like, of course it's bad. All I'm just saying is, like, it's frustrating that this technology is so suppressed, because I think, you know, they could fit it into this.
Yeah, they could. It would completely destroy the things that are the people and companies that are ruling our world.
Have to go. Like, in
the majority of people,
years, that stuff will be gone, whether they like it or not, because the collective has got too much awareness over its.
But these people are just holding on till the end of their life, you know.
Yeah,
and it's just a power thing, and they don't want to disrupt that. And
but also those resources, like, have an endpoint.
Yeah, they do.
You know, you can own an oil plant, but one day you're going to use up all that oil.
Yeah, I know. We all know this, but it's like they're the ones who are choosing greed over, you know, over all of this. And people might adapt. The people at the top might adapt as time goes on, but it's always going to be to try and, you know, create some sort of money. It's going to take like a big revolution in the human consciousness to actually shift to a non-profit, non-greed operation way of controlling society.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to bring awareness to these topics, because it is like, when this information is in the vast majority of the collective, then the collective consciousness will be making a shift in these things. That stuff is going out. We know already there's too much awareness of it in the collective consciousness. I just, you know, I know it's silly, but I just can't help but get so frustrated that...
Yeah.
Because I know you could make money off of this.
Yeah, because now we're on like a crunch, like, oh, we might go extinct. But like 100 years ago, Tesla was like, boom, here's free energy. You don't have to use up all these resources. It's right here.
Yeah.
And that we chose to go the other way.
And it feels like this, like, our civilization is going to probably have a fall, like, sooner than most. I feel like, you know, with some of the stuff we spoke about, it's like other ancient civilizations seem to have, possibly have a lot of this technology already.
Yeah.
You know, and we're using it.
Yeah.
So it's like, will we fall before we even get to that point?
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we need to fall in order to rise up again. Hopefully not. Hopefully we can just transition into it smoothly, but...
Here's hoping.
Moving on from Tesla and his saucer experiments, there were eventually, in the mid-1950s, an American inventor called Townsend Brown, and invented a new form of air propulsion. And I'm just going to go over this quite briefly, but he created these flying discs. They're quite small. He never put it into that we know of, that was not classified, into a bigger project, but he was managed to make these discs hover using electromagnetic propulsion. And he gave this presentation and this demonstration to the Navy at Pearl Harbor, and it was then they liked it so much that they ended up classifying the project. But we have some recordings of these tests. And here you can see some pictures of the flying discs, these discs that he was using. So Brown is holding a flying disc, which is tested in the Project Montgolfier, and on the right is a close-up of a disc showing outboard leading edge wire over here. And here is some of his experiments. He was actually suspending them from a wire, but they were moving through electromagnetic propulsion. So they weren't using, so they weren't like spinning because of some thrust from rockets or propellers or anything. They're just these discs, but they're using electromagnetic propulsion to spin around.
Yeah, but they're not actually holding themselves up, so it's not like anti-gravity.
No, but it is using the electromagnetic propulsion based on Tesla's theories. And here I have a video of one of the things that they actually managed to levitate upwards. And this is just a little clip of this small thing that they managed to levitate using electromagnetic propulsion and suspend in the air for a small amount of time. It is obviously nothing close to what we imagine UFOs to be. It looks like a little
school science project.
But this video is quite long, and they celebrate towards the end. It's an old video that has no sound, but they obviously discovered something, because they all celebrate, and they even test this theory within a vacuum and can still use electromagnetic propulsion to move in a vacuum. I'm not sure what they're doing here, but they're doing all sorts of experiments, and I'll have the video up for you guys. But there was someone recently who created these things called electrostatic wings. So he was replicating this person's theory, and here we have like what we can see that he's suspending them. So this is basically a reproduction of that guy's experiment, and these objects are moving in space due to electromagnetic propulsion. And ultimately, this technology was what led to a bomber that the U.S. government uses. I think it was called the T something bomber. But yeah, the government now uses a form of electromagnetic propulsion using more of a winged type craft.
Yeah.
So this is almost like a baby version of what Tesla was talking about.
Yeah.
But still using the theories that he was going on. So, yeah, moving on from there. Yeah, the B-2 bomber. So this is what his flying disc technology ended up being used for war. So, coming to the end of that, we cannot mention anti-gravity without bringing up the incredible case of Bob Lazar, which is what we've been kind of hinting to throughout this episode. So Bob Lazar was born on January 26th in 1959, and he has made some astonishing claims over the years and even taken polygraph tests to confirm his claims. He was hired by the U.S. government in the late 1980s to reverse engineer a craft, which he was told was alien technology. And this was done at the site known as S4, which is a subsidiary of Area 51 located in the Nevada desert. And he has gone on with a lot of detail, claiming that he found one of the most substantial claims, which was element 115. And at the time, it had not even been synthesized or found. It had, I think through the Hadron Collider, they found element 115 in an unstable form, which means that it could not hold itself. It would, destabilize after a couple moments. And so element 115 was, he said there was a stable form of element 115, which humans hadn't been able to synthesize yet. He said that in his time working on secret projects regarding UFO technology, had personally seen briefing documents that described alien involvement in human affairs spanning back almost 10,000 years, which kind of goes into all those ancient alien theories. He said that Bob Lazar spoke about how the S4 facility was opposite to Papoose Lake, which is located just to the south of the main Area 51 facility at Groom Lake. He professed that the site consisted of concealed aircraft carriers that were buried into the mountainside. Lazar spoke about his role within the facility, reverse engineering one of 9 flying saucers that were being kept there. He claimed that they were all of extraterrestrial origin. He famously described one of the alien crafts as the Sport model and spoke about how this craft was made out of a metallic substance similar in appearance and touch to stainless steel. And Bob Lazar appeared using his own name and without face cover in an interview, and his interview for the employment of Area 51 was through a contractor, EG&G, and his employer was the United States Navy. And it was in his interviews that Bob Lazar began to speak about the propulsion of the craft that he claimed to have worked on. And this is when we begin to go into the anti-gravity and how it links to that. And on one of his first days at the facility, I think you know the story pretty well too, he was taken in and given a partner, a buddy system. Yeah. And he was taken into this room where he and this person were meant to be working on this project together. And in the center of the room was this device. And when the device was turned on, Bob Lazar was probed to try and touch the device. But around, like a couple feet before the device, he felt a barrier, a resistance. And no matter what he could do, he couldn't touch the object. It was like there was an invisible force around it. They threw objects at the device and they went bouncing on bounced right off it. And it was here that Bob Lazar realized that it was producing an electromagnetic field that was creating a gravitational force. And that gravitational force was not allowing him to touch it. So we can go into a lot more detail, and Bob Lazar even said that there were a couple more craft that he saw, and he even saw it take flight. And he said things very similar to Tesla, that the air shimmered around it at certain angles. You couldn't even see it.
Yeah, when you walk underneath it, you couldn't, and you'd look up, you couldn't see it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said that it created its own space-time bubble or hole. And if we're thinking that space, time, gravity are all in relation to electromagnetism, like Tesla was talking about, that perhaps that it was creating this electromagnetic force that was generating its own gravitational speed and even bending the light around it. And this is what allowed it to go at really fast speeds and to maneuver, at right angles and do all this sort of things. And I think the way he was describing it was even a step above what Tesla was talking about.
Like it's obviously come from, I don't know, another planet or something other created by other beings. It was not created. What Bob Lazar worked on was clearly not created by humans, and that's why the government have got hold of these crafts, many varieties of these crafts apparently, and is having people trying to figure out like how the hell do these work. Like there's materials on there that you can't find on Earth as far as we know. Like the secrecy around it, like with the buddy system thing, it's like they were only allowed to work on it like a couple of hours a day, and they'd be called in at all random times, and you weren't allowed to talk to anyone else who was like trying to figure out the same ship,
different components of
it. You were only allowed to report back to the advisor that you've been
assigned to.
Yeah, right. And how limiting that actually is. It's all just to keep this so hush hush. But you know, if you can't like bounce off each other and all with the other people working on the same project, like no wonder it's taken forever to figure this stuff out. But it just shows that like this stuff has come from somewhere unearthly, and the technology is even more advanced than what we spoke about with Tesla. Yeah,
and we'll put some clip of Bob Lazar speaking over the top, because it's very interesting to hear him speak about it.
Totally impossible. The propulsion system is a gravity propulsion system. The power source is an antimatter reactor. This technology does not exist at all. I had access and was permitted to view and look at the operation of this main level with the gravity amplifiers and the level below. The craft that I worked on, that when it's going to travel a long distance, that is how it operates. It flies along and it puts its belly to the target and then brings all the amplifiers to power, and it shoots off in that direction. It doesn't fly as it would in the science fiction movies. It flies with the belly, the bottom forward.
But let's get into kind of what he was theorizing was happening with these spacecraft. So he's talking about these anti-gravity machines within the craft. And he says, assuming they're in space, they will focus the 3 gravity generators on the point they want to go. Now, to give an analogy, if you take a thin rubber sheet, lay it on a table, and put thumbtacks in each corner, then take a big stone and set it on one end of the rubber sheet, and say that's your spacecraft. You pick out a point that you want to go, which could be anywhere on the rubber sheet. Pinch that point with your fingers and pull it all the way up to the craft. That's how it focuses and pulls to that point. So it's pulling using electromagnetic frequencies along the fabric of space-time.
It's crazy.
When you then shut off the gravity generators, the stone or spacecraft follows that stretched rubber back to its point. There's no linear travel through space. It actually bends space and time and follows space as it retracts. In the first mode of travel around the surface of a planet, they essentially balance on the gravitational fields that the gravity generators put out, and they can ride a wave like a cork does in the ocean. In that mode, they're very unstable and are affected by the weather. In the other mode of travel, where they can travel vast distances, they can't really do that in a strong gravitational field like Earth, because to do that, first of all, they need to tilt on their side, usually not out in space. Then they can focus on the point they need to with the gravity generators and move on. If you can picture space as a fabric and the speed of light is your limit, it'll take you so long, even at the speed of light, to get from point A to point B. You can't exceed it, not in this universe anyway. So there has to be a way to bypass speed and light. And they were doing this by using this anti-gravitational technology. So recent research into Bose-Einstein condensate has found that by slowing down a body of atoms to within a fraction of a degree Kelvin, they coalesce into a superatom. And when suitably excited by an oscillating field, the Bose-Einstein condensate superatom propagates matter waves. Now, it's only at an early stage of development here on Earth, but it is hoped that one day this technology will produce a tightly focused matter wave beam. That is interesting here because if you look at the diagram above, which I will put, of the gravity generators of Lazar, its elements look exactly like the rings of optical lasers and magnetic traps used in BEC technology to slow down the atoms, and that these generators emit a beam, one of which is enough for the craft to ride upon. It could mean that the ETs use a system closely related to the propagation of such matter waves, but that is only a theory. So inside the gravitational reactor, element 115 is bombarded with a proton which plugs into the nucleus of the 115 atom and becomes element 116, which immediately decays and releases or radiates a small amount of antimatter. The antimatter is released into a tunnel tube which keeps it from reacting with the matter that surrounds it. It is then directed towards a gaseous matter target at the end of the tube. The matter and antimatter collide and annihilate, totally converting to energy. The heat from this reaction is converted into electrical energy, a near 100% efficient thermonuclear generator. And that's what Bob Lazar was saying. He's saying that the generator didn't give off any heat. And that's what they're saying here, in a 100% efficient thermoelectric generator, meaning there's no loss of heat or energy. The energy is completely self-contained and it doesn't produce excess heat. But what Bob Lazar was so puzzled by is that everything gives off even a small amount of heat. There's nothing that we have that is 100% efficient. And this was. And yeah, it didn't lose anything. So here are some kind of diagrams of the spacecraft, and he goes a lot into the propulsion systems. He says the craft does not create an anti-gravity field, as some have surmised. It's a gravitational field that's out of phase with the current one. It's the same gravitational wave. The phases vary from 180 degrees to 0 in a longitudinal propagation. So he's saying it's like it's phasing from our own gravitational field. So it's like it's almost going in a different dimension to what we are in. So it's like phasing into another field.
Yeah, because it's creating its own gravitational field. So it's not affected by ours.
Yeah.
And we're not affected by its. And unless it chose to, like, wanted us to be, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, he goes on to kind of describe...
The weird thing, about the craft Bob Lazar was working on is that there's no controls.
Yeah.
You know? It is just crazy.
Yeah.
Like, there's no buttons, no controls, like, yeah.
Well, and it kind of goes back to what Tesla was saying, that, you know, if we learn how to harness this ether, that maybe we could do it just by force of will.
Yeah, and that's what they think. They
think
these ships, like, with the conscious mind.
With the consciousness, yeah. And many theories about certain craft is that they're almost extensions of the pilot's mind. Though, I'm not sure how, but remember, because he wasn't classified to the information, but Bob Lazar watched one of the craft taking flight. So how was it that the pilot took flight, you know? How did he control it if there's no modules or controls? Because
they've obviously figured out something, but he wouldn't know, would he? Because you're not allowed to talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. Craft generates these gravity waves that beam through the shell casing. And if the shell was constructed not of plain metal, but of an artificial metal, and the electromagnetic waves being used were of small enough wavelength, radio waves or microwave length, being particularly suitable, then just as Lazar has implied, the hull of the craft could be used as a lens for focusing the electromagnetic waves. Because with radio waves of very short wavelength, it has long been established that they behave somewhat like light waves, and that they have what is termed optical properties, meaning these waves can be bent or flattened by a suitable constructed lens, such as a lens for a radio microwave. So it could be that the shape of the craft is designed in such a way to be used as a lens to focus the electromagnetic waves. And here's a diagram kind of doing that. And here it's showing how there's this part of the machine that can direct the waves and pass through the hull, focusing them in different ways. And yeah, there's a lot to this, but I think we're running out of time.
Yeah.
And come to the end of the episode. And as I was doing my research, I found even more stuff. There's a lot of stuff on this, and some of it goes right over my head because, you know, I'm not in this field and I don't have a good grasp on physics. But there is a company called the Starburst Foundation, which claims to be actively working on electrogravitics and field propulsion technology today, as well as subquantum kinetics. And I don't even know what subquantum kinetics means, but if you want to go check them out, you can look at the Starburst Foundation.
Yeah, that's really good that there's people out there
Whew.
still trying to work on it. Well done. I feel like you did a great job. You say you can't fully grasp it all, but obviously we're not scientists, but I definitely think you did a great job at bringing light to this subject and putting it in layman's terms, and more people can understand and get a glimpse at this information.
Yeah, there's a lot there, but hopefully we covered the main points and kind of decided, found a way to think of gravity in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that we possibly have had the technology of anti-gravity for almost over 100 years, maybe a lot longer, maybe, like you said, back to the ancient days.
Yeah, I really feel so. I don't have any proof, but I definitely think so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Great.
Any closing thoughts?
No, I just love this idea. I love like the story or the information brought out by Bob Lazar. We've watched like all the possible sort of interviews you can watch of him. There's a great one on Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Although he's got a headache from
yeah.
most of it. He got a migraine.
Well, I guess we could link them in the description of the interviews, or just look them up. Just look them up. But yeah, I highly recommend that because I feel like he has such a cool story, and we didn't even go into everything that happened in his story. So it's definitely worth. Don't feel like you've heard it all. There's so much more. Yeah. And I feel like he's a very legit person. So.
Yeah, you could do a whole podcast episode on just Bob Lazar. So we really just skimmed through the detail.
There's so much more. It's very interesting, and I just loved hearing everything today, like the Tesla stuff and how exciting the invention of this technology is. So hopefully it's good to see that there's another company, the Starburst Foundation, and who knows, like this stuff could be in our future. Our kids could be flying around in the future on something cool. Yeah, that'd be amazing. Yeah, and I mean, one thing is just like from just a bit of psychedelics and stuff, my mind automatically links to Tesla's theory. It just, based on what I've seen, that in those states of consciousness, it's very similar to what Tesla's talking about. This etheric substrate that intermingles and connects all things, binds things like the tissues or fascia in our body, connects everything together, and that that there's electrical charges in the air and there's energy in the air. Even in deep states of meditation, you can begin to feel that and see that and access it. Yeah. And even the yogis base their whole system on this, that there is an ether and that the body can be used as a generator to access that energy. And so, going a step past Tesla, and instead of creating an external device, using your body. Yeah, because we are mostly made of ether, right?
Yeah. Because,
we're not actually, nothing is actually
what is it? They said physical. Like 97%, only 3% of the universe is matter.
Yeah, like everything is just like vibrating energy. Yeah. Absolutely. Like everything is just like more dense forms of it when it becomes physical. Yeah. But then surely that's the way, like it makes sense with like what you've seen on your trips and with what Tesla's saying, like how you can start to morph that and create with that, yeah, just literally moving energy around, right? Manipulating it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys, thank you so much for sticking with that and sticking with me puzzling through some of those theories and some of those explanations. And thank you so much for tuning in. If you stuck to the end, then hopefully you feel motivated to subscribe.
Yeah, please subscribe and like and comment. It really helps us, keeps us motivated we love doing this, but it does help keep us motivated to keep going, bring in these unique or less heard of ideas to the forefront. And if you are listening to us, be aware that we also are on YouTube now, so you can go on YouTube, check out all the visuals and the images of the stuff that we're talking about, if you want to check that out. And also, leave a review if you are listening to. That really helps. A 5-star review.
And if you're on YouTube, then like we said in the beginning, we have a whole cache of old episodes for you to sink your teeth into. Perfect thing to do while you're out and about doing busy things that
gardening, cleaning, cooking, driving.
All right.
Okay, thanks for watching, listening, guys, and we will see you for another fascinating topic next week.
Woohoo! Bye, guys.
Bye.